Welcome to Looking Within, a podcast to help you quiet your mind, settle your body, and see God's presence in your everyday life. I'm Julie. I hope our time together will help you to feel more grounded, whole, and filled with a growing desire to be a conduit of God's love and presence to the world around you. Now, let's begin. So how do we celebrate Christmas in a COVID world? This is the dilemma Charles Ortloff and I have been discussing this month in our Looking Within episodes. So far in our Advent journey, we've talked about hope. Not our hope, but God's hope in Christ Jesus. We get to God's hope by holding the contradictions we experience of hopefulness and hopelessness. We've also talked about joy. When life is so overwhelming that we despair, we are invited to think of how this all ends. God tells us, we win. Or as Julian of Norwich loved to say, and all will be well, and every kind of thing will be well. Knowing the ending of our story, we can take a deep breath, relax, and even smile, knowing that Christ is by us in the midst of even the most uncertain times. This week, we continue our Advent journey by holding on to the question, where is our peace this Christmas? Today we hear the story of the Christmas Truce of 1914, when soldiers put down their rifles and celebrated Christ's birth together. This story teaches how to live with the externals of life, with war and a global pandemic, while at the same time finding an inner peace and calm.
Late on Christmas Eve, 1914, World War I, men of the British Expeditionary Force in their trenches heard German troops not far away in their trenches singing Christmas carols. The Brits saw lanterns and small fir Christmas trees along the German trenches. Messages were shouted back and forth. Then Christmas carols were sung. After some hesitation, they put down their weapons and met in no man's land. The fighting stopped for the evening. A joint celebration began. They exchanged cigars and brandy and food from home. They shared pictures of their families and played a game of football, soccer to us. Some might call it a miracle, a Christmas miracle. Peace in the midst of such a horrid war. One important factor in this truce seems to have been that Saxon troops from Germany were involved. They were universally regarded as easygoing. One Saxon German shouted to the Brits, "We are Saxons, you are Anglo-Saxons. What is there for us to fight about?" Who is my enemy? In 1914, some soldiers put down their rifles, at least for a few hours. They shared so much. They sang the same carols, worshiped the same Christ child. They had their families, loved to play football, and now lived in horrible circumstances of mud, rain, and war. They even shared a common ancestral home in Saxony, Germany. They looked at each other. They saw a deep connection. Who is my enemy this Christmas? What people in your life are robbing you of Christmas, of peace this Christmas? Are they really your enemies? Can you look at them differently and receive their gift of peace? After all, we all live, we love, we suffer, we die. Put down your rifles. Come into the center and share in the Christmas peace that Christ has brought for all.
I love that story, Charles. In addition to a global pandemic, we live in a time of strife and contention in our country and between our country and others. This story reminds us that we are invited to look at everyone as brothers and sisters in Christ, each a beloved of God. There's peace for us in seeing that humanity is interconnected in so many ways, but especially connected through Christ. I think of another kind of peace as well, or lack of it. COVID-19 has taken away some of our sense of well-being and peace. How do we find the peace of Christmas in a COVID world?
Yes, that is a bigger challenge. On the one hand, we must do all that we can to rid ourselves of this disease. That's the external reality of our lives. But on the other hand, can we find a moment of peace even in this challenging time? That's the internal reality of our lives. Paul called it the peace that passes all understandings. Our minds don't get it, but our souls do. John O'Donohue has this great blessing for our homes. He writes, "May you have eyes to see that no visitor arrives without a gift, and no guest leaves without a blessing." We've probably all had the eyes to see this truth. No visitor arrives without a gift. Everyone and everything that comes into our life has the potential of blessing us if we will only see God in it. If we patiently wait, holding even our enemies and the disasters of life in silent prayer, we often find God and the gift of peace.
You're right. With all of its challenging events and circumstances that have turned our lives upside down, we can find the gift of this peace and presence of Christ in the people and events of our lives. God comes to us in everything if we only remain open and receptive to that possibility. Let's think about that during some quiet moments together. In this quiet space and time, I'd invite you to gently close your eyes and to take a few deep breaths in and out, in and out. Hear the sound of the bowl calling you to look within. Let it center you. Let it awaken you to God's presence. Think of what is troubling you today. Some person or people, or a circumstance in your life. Hold this visitor in silence and prayer. Watch for God to show up. And wait for the gift of this visitor. We'll be back with you in about 2 minutes. is in everything, in every visitor, even the ones we may dislike. Take one more minute to embrace the isness of life. Welcome every visitor and experience that gift of inner peace. I'd invite you now to take a few deep breaths in and out. In and out. Hear the bowl sound calling you back to this day. Gently open your eyes, remaining still for a moment longer. The externals of our lives today can be challenging, robbing us of any inner peace. But if we hold in silence the promise that God is in all things, we can have a different attitude about people and our life circumstances. If we don't treat our guests as enemies, we may find the blessing from God. We can live internally in peace and externally awaiting God's Christmas promise of peace for all and in all.
On Wednesday and Friday of this week, we take another look at this business of seeing God in every guest and opening our hearts to a blessing. We will look at the story of Christ's birth from the perspective of Joseph.
And in a second bonus episode on Friday, we'll talk about how this theme shows up in our own lives. During the 4 weeks of Advent, through 12 Looking Within podcasts, join us as often as you can as we explore experiencing hope, joy, peace, and love as we celebrate Christmas in a COVID world. Thank you for making time for your inner self today, for developing and enriching your relationship with God through reflection and discovery. Whatever you've experienced, carry that with you in the coming days. You can find more episodes at our website, Gloria-Day, that's DEI.com/lookingwithinpodcast, or subscribe through your favorite podcast app. If you know someone who might enjoy and benefit from this podcast, share it with them. Your financial contributions make this ministry possible. To give, visit gloria-day.com/giving. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you next time.